and youth. The mandate of our office extends across the province, which is now called Manitoba. As an office, we therefore live and work on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyate, Denesuin, and Nehethua. We acknowledge part of Manitoba is located on the beautiful homeland of the Red River Métis. We strive to contribute to improving lives by listening to children and youth, encouraging diversity on our team, seeking and consulting wisdom beyond ourselves, and always learning and growing towards reconciliation and collaboration. If you want to learn more about our reconciliation strategy, it's available on our website, and you can find more information there. We had an introduction slide, but we've already gone over our bios, so I think we can skip that one. Whoops, sorry, press the wrong button. And I'll turn it over to Alex, who will go over the agenda.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for that generous introduction. So here's what we plan to cover today in our explanation of the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth. First of all, we'd like to talk to you about our mission, vision, and values, which are guided by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, also known as the UNCRC. This document is at the core of all of the work that we do here. Next, we'll tell you how our office came to be and how our mandate has changed and evolved over 25 years with the Advocate of Children and Youth Act. We'll discuss the role of our Knowledge Keeper and Elders Council at our office and delve into our program areas, which are advocacy services, investigations and child death reviews, special reports, quality assurance, youth engagement, and YAS, which is our Youth Ambassador Advisory Squad. Then finally, we'll share our contact information at the end, and we'll have time to answer any questions. So if you do have something to ask throughout the presentation as well, and you don't want to forget, feel free to raise your hand and jump in or put it in the chat, and we can answer the questions as we go. So there's lots to cover, so we'll get started. So first off, our mission at Macy is to amplify the voices and champion the rights of children and youth and young adults. Our vision is a safe and healthy society that hears, includes, values, and protects all children, youth, and young adults. Our values include child-centeredness, equity, respect, accountability, and independence. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, or the UNCRC, is a cornerstone document that guides all of our work. Under our legislation, the SSCY, our office holds a responsibility to promote awareness and understanding of children's rights, among other criteria. We use the 42 key articles of the UNCRC as guides when we assess situations regarding the availability and quality of public services. In case you didn't know, Canada signed on to the UNCRC in 1991. It outlines all the rights everyone under 18 has, including rights to live in a safe environment, to be protected from discrimination, to have quality education, food, clean water, and more. The federal government signed on to uphold these rights, and the Manitoba government has a duty to uphold them as well. We have a poster versions of the UNCRC that we designed in a youth-friendly language, which you can ask us for to send out to you or find on our website, and we'll provide that link in the chat. The posters are available in English, French, Cree, Ojibwe, Oji Cree, Michif, Tagalog, and in English and Braille at our office. So other key documents, a couple of other key documents that we refer to often are the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. In our work, we strive to walk the path of reconciliation, and we work individually and as a team to understand and implement the work of the TRC. We try to embed cultural awareness and cultural safety within all of the work we do on behalf of children, youth, and our families. In terms of legislation, we often reference the Youth Criminal Justice Act, the Child and Family Services Act, plus the Advocate for Children and Youth Act, which guides all of our work and lays out our mandate. So now I'll turn it over to Alan, who will present on the history of Macy. Oh, Alan, you're on mute.
Sorry, you think I know how to use Zoom by now. I'm just going to share a bit of history about Macy and how our legislation, the Advocate for Children and Youth Act, came into effect. In 1985, a landmark report known as the Kimmelman Report reviewed the adoption practices with respect to First Nation and Métis children in Manitoba. This report called for a child representative office to be open to offer children in foster care support and guidance. This recommendation led to the creation of the Office of the Children's Advocate, which opened in 1993. The legislation under which the Children's Advocate received its mandate was the Child and Family Services Act, which meant that the Children's Advocate reported to the Minister of Family Services at first. In 1999, the OCA became an independent office of the Legislative Assembly and ceased reporting to the Minister of Family Services. However, the legislation that described the OCA's mandate was still embedded in the Child and Family Services Act. In 2008, the responsibility for child death reviews was transferred from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner to the Office of the Children's Advocate. There was increased discussion about the need for independent legislation for the Advocate in Manitoba, which is the direction that many other child and youth advocate offices in Canada have now moved. Ted Hughes, the commissioner in the Phoenix Sinclair inquiry, endorsed this in 2014. By 2017, the Advocate for Children and Youth Act was introduced and passed by all three parties in the legislature. In March 2018, the Advocate for Children and Youth Act became law in Manitoba, though the government decided to implement it in phases 1, 2, and 3. Phase one was immediately enacted, allowing the Advocate's mandate to expand to cover all public services, including children and youth, not just child welfare and adoptions. Phase 2 was enacted on June 1st, 2021. It involves investigating deaths of children who have had interactions with mental health, addictions, and youth justice systems in the year before their death. Phase 3, which has not yet come into force, will let us receive reports of serious injuries of children and youth and investigate where necessary. This legislative power has not come into effect yet, though it is in the works and should be coming soon. The Advocate for Children and Youth Act is the fairly new legislation that guides our work. It came into effect in March 2018, expanding our mandate considerably from when we were only able to formally advocate under the areas of child welfare and adoptions. Under the SSCY, there is an independent advocate appointed by the Manitoba Legislative Assembly, which is currently Ainsley Crone. Our legislation now allows our office to take a lead role in advocating for children's rights in 8 domains. Those are child welfare, youth justice, mental health, addictions, education, adoption, disabilities, and victim supports, including domestic violence and sexual exploitation. Our mandate allows us to call on public systems to address inefficiencies and gaps in services so that all young people have opportunities to grow up healthy and protected so they can fulfill their amazing potential. We have the capacity through the Advocate to make recommendations to government directly and track progress by government on improving public systems for children, youth, and families. We all know government systems and public services can be complex and difficult to navigate. So our office exists to help young people and their families know where to go for help. We support young people so their voices and opinions are heard and considered when decisions are being made that affect their lives. Because of this widened mandate that just came into effect in March 2018, many folks still associate Macy primarily with child welfare advocacy. Our work scope has broadened considerably, however, and we are getting more public recognition and requests for help in the other service areas every day. Our definition of youth, for anyone who might be wondering, includes youth up to the age of 21. Ultimately, protecting children and youth and their legal rights to be supported in special ways as they grow is the responsibility of all Manitobans. We know there are many systems that are difficult to access or operating inefficiently for young people. These need to be improved so all of the children in our province have equal opportunities, not only to live, but to thrive. Before we talk more about our advocacy services, I just want to underscore that Macy is an independent office of the Legislative Assembly. This means we sit outside and apart from government. This is important when advocating on behalf of children and youth in order to hold public systems accountable, and it's vital when conducting our research. Other independent offices of the Legislative Assembly are the Ombudsman's Office, the Office of the Auditor General, and Elections Manitoba. Most of the designated service areas under our legislation, as you can see on the slide, fall under 5 government departments, Government of Manitoba departments to be clear in this chart, and we can provide official advice to the ministers of families, justice, health, mental health, and education. We can also advocate for youth at any level with service providers and agencies, with the department or with ministers in some cases. We do individual and systemic advocacy work. Our special projects like research reports, which we'll talk about later, emerge from trends that we are seeing in our work with children and youth. Findings and recommendations in these special reports emerge from data we collect, which is free from government influence. The advocate can report publicly on implementation and compliance with our recommendations under the SSCY. We usually do that around November, December of each year with an annual compliance report, which you can find on our website. And now I'll turn it over to Alex, who's going to talk more about our advocacy services.
Thank you, Alan. So although we have a number of different programs and service areas within our office, what unites each element of our office is that all of our staff are advocates for children and youth. This is a group photo of all of these advocates from 2019. Some of our team members work directly with children and youth who are currently receiving services or who are entitled to receive those services. Those staff work inside our intake and advocacy services program. Some of our team members are special investigators who advocate for children and youth as we review and investigate the services that were delivered to a young person prior to their death. Those staff are part of our investigations and child death review team. Some of our team members work in the youth engagement program, which works directly with youth, including our Youth Ambassador Advisory Squad, also known as YAS, to help our office serve our mandate and be youth-centered in its advocacy focus. The youth engagement team also helps us spread the word in presentations and online about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child. We also have a research and public education department that studies and analyzes systemic trends of what we see in the province. Those team members advocate on systemic levels for better services, better outcomes for Manitoba children and youth. They do formal research and also help educate the public about the experiences of Manitoba's children and youth. Our quality assurance staff work to analyze data and other information to help our office understand internally as well as externally where additional opportunities to improve efficiency and effectiveness might lie. At the most basic level, what our office does is listen to the concerns of children and youth. We also share advice on how to improve self-advocacy. We do this because each child that is receiving services has their own story to tell about how those services are impacting them. And for us as professionals who have the profound privilege and responsibility to serve children, there is no other voice more important or telling than that of a child. We often hear the term best interests of the child, and we often use this term at Macy. This is a photo of Macy staff and YAS members, by the way. It was taken at an unveiling of their first mural this past summer on Nichiwam. YAS, again, YAS stands for the Youth Ambassador Advisory Squad. Different people and organizations have different definitions for that phrase. At our office, we see it as a child first principle that comes out of Article 3 of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. Article 3 states that in all actions concerning children, whether undertaken by public or private social welfare institutions courts of law, administrative authorities, or legislative bodies, the best interests of the child shall be a primary consideration. Assessing the best interests of a child means to evaluate and balance all the elements necessary to make a decision on a specific situation for a specific individual, child, or group of children. In all our work, we advocate with individual children and on behalf of children to advise them of their rights and promote their best interests. This is the goal we believe we share with service providers. Although some service providers tell us they feel nervous when they know Macy is involved in a situation, we believe that when service providers or other stakeholders keep the best interests of children at the core of decision-making, it is likely that positive resolutions for young people can be achieved. So first off, this is Wavy Guy, our office's mascot. He was designed by a youth and he really enjoys waving and celebrating children and youth. One of our main areas of work at the Advocacy Services, which provides direct frontline help for children, youth, adults, and their families. In 2020 and 21, we received 2,423 requests for support. We also opened up a northern office in Thompson 2 years ago, which has helped us provide more direct service to children and youth in the north. The majority of our requests for support come in by phone and our toll-free number to call for help, which is up on the screen. We'll put it up again along with our contact info toward the end of the slideshow. So anyone can call the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth if they have concerns about a young person, including young people. This is a graph at the left, and it shows the ages of those who received advocacy support from us in 2020 and 2021. You can see about half were in the age of 13 to 18 years old age range. At the right, you can see a bit more of a demographic breakdown. Approximately 75% of the children and youth we worked with last year identified as Indigenous. We get calls from a diverse makeup of people, biological parents, foster parents, adoptive parents, teachers, CFS workers, other professionals, and other adults call us when they're concerned about the services being provided to a child or youth they know. As you can see from the graph at the left, the majority of folks reach out to us by phone. One of the other important things that we always tell children and youth who contact us is that we protect their confidentiality and will not reveal who called us about any situation unless the child or youth gives us permission to do so. The same goes for any source of referral who contacts our offices. All of it is kept confidential. When anyone calls, they'll speak to one of our advocacy officers on intake. As mentioned, as of 2019, we have an intake office open in Thompson, Manitoba, at the City Centre Mall. We share the space with the Manitoba Ombudsman. At intakes, all concerns will be heard. When youth up to the age of 21 call our office, they're given priority and every effort will be made not to put them through to voicemail. After hearing the questions or concerns, we may go through some possible ways of addressing the problem. One of them is self-advocacy. A youth or adult caller may decide they want to try the proposed resolution process on their own and see if they need further assistance from us later. If the situation is one of our designated service areas, we will always offer our help. Callers may try to resolve the matter on their own first, and that is their choice. There are some other situations that are outside of our formal mandate, but know that we can still likely offer some informal advocacy support and point you in the direction you need. When we open up a case for ongoing advocacy services, in most cases, the advocacy officer who spoke to the youth or source of referral on intake will continue to work with that youth. If the youth has had a file opened previously, we usually try to have that youth connected to the advocacy officer that they're most familiar with. So now I'll pass on the torch again to Alan, who will present information about our Knowledge Keeper and Elders Council.
So there's two important areas or roles at our office that are the Knowledge Keeper and the Elders Council. Macy has one Knowledge Keeper on staff, Their role is ensuring an Indigenous presence by providing advice and guidance to our program areas, teaching and sharing the rich history of Indigenous peoples, supporting youth and families in our advocacy program when additional cultural supports would be beneficial, providing important cultural and emotional support to each of the families and staff that are involved with the public reports that our office releases every year, opening and closing meetings with prayers, hosting staff learning sessions on a range of topics and issues, being present at relevant community events on behalf of Macy and often alongside other Macy staff, assisting in the search and selection of youth ambassadors for YAS, as well as elders for our Elders Council, building positive relationships with youth ambassadors in ceremony and during community outings, and leading our staff and YAS members in medicine picking, sweat lodges, feeding, sewing, and more. We also have an Elders Council, which is currently made up of 7 elders. 4 of them are pictured on the screen with Ainsley and our former knowledge keeper, Cheryl. We are committed to creating meaningful dialogue with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Manitoba. Collaborations with elders and knowledge keepers help guide our office's work for Indigenous children and youth. The Elders Council provides both spiritual and cultural guidance relating to the ongoing work of Macy and provides specific supports to the Manitoba Advocate and 2 deputy Manitoba advocates in developing relationships with First Nations, government structures, and their communities. Elders provide invaluable knowledge and wisdom that has been shaped through their lived experience. They are respected by their community and hold the knowledge that is needed to ensure services are provided in a respectful manner. The Elders Council and Knowledge Keepers consist of male and female members from Indigenous communities that are representative of the children we serve. We often look to the Elders Council, the Knowledge Keeper, and our Youth Ambassador Advisory Squad for advice on and guidance on our special reports. These are usually compiled by the investigations or research teams, and they include specific recommendations to government about how to improve public services. As part of our investigations, we review the public services involved with a child or family, such as mental health, addictions, education, or justice. We may request documentation from the service providers and interview people close to the child or family to increase our understanding of what's happening or what happened to a child. We may also visit a child's community to gain an understanding of the resources available. In our investigations, we try to connect with the family to understand their perspective on the services they receive. Recommendations may be made to government and/or service providers for improvements. Under the Advocate for Children and Youth Act, we also have the ability to release public reports regarding the services we review or investigate. Being open and transparent with Manitobans about what we're seeing is important to help create systemic change. The office has 2 goals when releasing a public special report. One is increasing public awareness of services and gaps in services in order to increase effectiveness and responsiveness of those services in hopes of inspiring meaningful change. And 2, as a measure of transparency and accountability for ourselves, as well as for service systems. Since 2018 and the changes under the ACYA, we have released 14 special reports so far. You can read all of the reports on our website, manitobaadvocate.ca. We can also offer presentations on individual special reports to groups that are interested. One of the special reports we did recently is called Bridging the Gaps, Achieving Substantive Equality for Children with Disabilities in Manitoba. It's a special report stemming from a child death investigation and broader systemic research. The Manitoba Advocate was notified of the death of a child we call Emma in the report in 2017. Emma's family struggled to navigate disability services in Manitoba and ultimately relied on Child and Family Services for support. Emma died accidentally just days before an emergency systems meeting was scheduled to discuss an out-of-home placement for her. In addition to Emma's investigation, Macy includes findings from a survey of caregivers of children and youth with disabilities, interviews with academic experts, current and former service providers, families, and children and youth with disabilities, and extensive data analysis of children's disability services and child and family services records. Over 400 people were consulted in the making of this report. The Manitoba Advocate makes 9 recommendations to the provincial government and service providers for system improvements. In summary, what we found is that each of these themes explored through the report are not separate but interrelated. This report found that wait times for diagnostic assessment are sometimes the first years families experience to accessing services. A diagnosis is a requirement for access to children's disability services, and most support services. Delays in assessment result in delays for accessing early interventions. Once at CDS, families are able to connect with case manager and respite. Workers are dedicated and skilled, however, large caseloads translate to less contact with families and less proactive case planning. Further, underfunded respite services and cost-saving measures, such as self-administered respite, place additional burdens on families. Families who can will pay out of pocket for supports or to supplement the income of respite workers, but not everyone is able to do that. When needs escalate, sometimes when the child ages or circumstances change, families often find themselves in crisis, like Emma's family did. Families with less natural supports, such as single-parent families, struggle even more. Many families look to access alternative out-of-home care, either full-time or part-time, as a way to gain respite. However, there are gaps in alternative care options in Manitoba. Wait times are extensive and options are scarce. This is when the child welfare system may come in because of their ability to license placements. They are brought in by CDS, or sometimes families contact them separately. In some cases, children with disabilities enter the care of CFS to receive reports related to their disability and without protection concerns. These are not all of the barriers that children with disabilities and their families experience, but they are the ones we focused on for this report. We hope that together we can discuss ways to change these things for families like Emma's and many others. Some of these issues affect children with complex and high needs, but many, including diagnostic assessments, case management, and respite, affect almost every child with a disability in Manitoba. And again, you can read more about that report on our website. And then I'll turn it back over to Alex, who will talk about systemic advocacy that we do.
Thanks, Alan. So our special reports can be an example of systemic advocacy, which we also now have as a program area. Systemic advocacy means advocating about matters that are recurring and may affect more than one child. Through the work we do on individual advocacy, investigations, and research, we gather information on trends and issues that occur over time. This can indicate an overall gap in the system or problem with the way a particular issue is handled in the system. In certain cases, we conduct systemic research in order to release larger examinations of issues related to service delivery. Some of the systemic issues we've looked at so far include the availability and eligibility requirements of addictions detox treatment, use of isolation, pepper spray in youth custody facilities, and mental health service availability. Systemic advocacy has been very active in the disability services domain this quarter. Sparked by the recent Right to Read report that came from Ontario, we're currently responding to referrals related to the lack of supports for school-aged children with dyslexia, autism, and other learning disabilities. In addition to engaging with the Department of Education, this work has led to planning for our upcoming social media launch in participation with Learning Disability Awareness Month in October. Systemic advocacy is also responding to issues with the administration of the provincial's Children Disability Respite Program, which, as we revealed in Bridging the Gaps, is reportedly being experienced as burdensome for families and contributing to parental burnout. Finally, systemic advocacy is partnering with public education by promoting awareness of our services to disability-related organizations and relevant family networks, such as this important audience today. We're going to change gears now and talk a bit about another area of our office, that's our investigations and child death review work. Our office is notified by the Chief Medical Examiner of deaths of any Manitoban aged 21 and under. We review each death to see if it's in scope for investigation from our office and analyze whether there are reoccurring patterns and risk factors happening with these deaths. In 2020-2021, there were 235 children, youth, and young adults who died in Manitoba. The majority of these child deaths were due to natural causes and health issues, such as babies being born prematurely. 66 of the deaths that year were reviewable by the advocate, which means they had some child welfare involvement or a CFS file closed within a year of their death. As of June 1st, our legislation has expanded to allow for reviews or investigation of deaths where a child, youth, or family also had involvement with the mental health, addictions, or youth justice systems in the year before their death as well. While the majority of child and infant deaths are natural, the manner of death most common among youth is suicide. The leading manner of death for youth 10 and over, or over 10 rather, and young adults between the age of 10 and 20 in Manitoba is suicide. And that trend is appearing across Canada with youth suicide rates that are far too high, especially among Indigenous communities. This speaks to the incredible need in Manitoba for more mental health and addiction services spread equitably around the province, as well as preventative care. Here's more of a visual graph with statistics on child deaths in Manitoba over the past decade or so. You can see here that the number of child deaths has gradually gone up, while the number of reviewable deaths in CIC deaths, meaning child and care deaths, are a little more static. Each of these numbers represents a child or youth who died far too soon. We keep this top of mind when working with data at Macy and the work in the best interests of the child to prevent future deaths. As mentioned, the Chief Medical Examiner sends us notification when a child or death from birth to age 21 dies. There are 5 manners of death: natural, undetermined, accidental, suicide, and homicide. You can see on the slide some of the groupings by manner of death for young people ages 10 to 17. As mentioned previously, suicide has become the leading manner of death for this age group over the past 5 years. For children under 10, natural deaths due to prematurity, disease, or medical fragility are more common. Sorry,
something happened.
Okay. So I'll just continue. So as we mentioned earlier, the provincial government passed the SSCY in 2018, but only the first phase of the legislation was enacted. Phase 2 came into effect on June 1st, 2021. Phase 2 expands our mandate to review the deaths of many more children and youth and hopefully learn lessons from their deaths to prevent future negative outcomes for kids. After receiving notice of the death of a child or young adult from the Chief Medical Examiner under the Fatality Inquiries Act, the advocate may now review a child's death if the child or his or her family was receiving a reviewable service at the time of death or in the year before the death, and a young child's death if the child or young adult was receiving services under Section 50, subsection 2 of the Child and Family Services Act at the time of their death or in the year before the death. A reviewable service can mean the following: services and programs for children and their families provided under the Child and Family Services Act or the Adoption Act, mental health services for children provided by or on behalf of a public body or healthcare facility, addiction services for children provided by or on behalf of a public body or a healthcare facility, youth justice services, services for young adults provided under Section 50, subsection 2 of the Child and Family Services Act to assist former permanent wards in their transition to independence, and finally, additional designated services that are set out in regulations. So at this point, again, I'll pass the torch to Alan to discuss serious injury reporting.
So this is the section of the act that I mentioned we are still waiting on the government to enact. This phase 3 of the act will ensure that serious injuries of children and youth are reported to the advocate, who will keep track of them in a centralized database. Such a database does not currently exist in Manitoba, and there is no mandatory reporting of serious injuries to the advocate yet. The advocate is currently empowered to conduct serious injury investigations when they come to her attention from the community or through the media, but service providers are not yet required to report injuries to the attention of the Manitoba advocate. This is an important addition to the work of the advocate because many public departments have formal reporting processes when a child or youth sustains an injury, but Manitoba does not yet have a centralized reporting structure to collect and analyze that information that's coming in from across multiple service streams. This section of the new act will allow us to create a centralized hub of that information, so we can then provide information analysis back to service providers and the public about how and when children and youth are being injured and what changes could be introduced to make young people safer. In British Columbia, where they already have similar legislation in play, they count about 650 injury reports annually, and their child population is not as service involved as Manitoba. Under phase 3, service providers for child welfare, adoptions, mental health addictions, and youth justice will have a duty to report all serious injuries to the advocate. The advocate may conduct a review if the child or their family was receiving a reviewable service at the time of their injury or within the year preceding their injury. Serious injuries could include anything that is life-threatening, sexual assaults, or injuries that require hospital admission or admission to another healthcare facility. Another work area in our office that complements our investigations and special reports is quality assurance. Our quality assurance team's main responsibility is data collection and management, includes data collection and management. Essentially, we are ensuring the data we are collecting through our work is accurate and that we are able to report to the public and legislative assembly about the work we do. We also analyze our own data for trends and try to understand the concerns we are seeing in service providers in Manitoba. Program support is another area that quality assurance works on, and they develop a policy and procedures to assist our programs in delivering consistent services. A lot of this work involves working with our programs to know what they are trying to achieve and how our services can help them achieve those goals. They also monitor recommendations. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, part of our mandate is to monitor the implementation of our recommendations that we make. We want to be able to hold services accountable to our recommendations and ensure that meaningful change is occurring. This involves a lot of collaboration with the service systems and government to ensure the intent of our recommendations are being followed. Part of the recommendation monitoring will also be that we will be reporting on government and service agencies' progress in implementing our recommendations. We have put up some progress. We have put up some progress updates on our recommendations tracking section of our website so far, so you can check that out. And we'll be putting a lot more fulsome progress reports later this year. We've mentioned this a couple times already through our presentation about our youth engagement team. So I'll tell you a little bit more about them. They're focused on empowering youth to lead and strengthen the services provided to children, youth, and young adults in Manitoba. We have 2 coordinators who build relationships with youth across Manitoba to better understand the issues that they're facing and ensure the work that we do is meaningful and child-focused and relevant. The youth engagement team also has developed our Youth Ambassador Advisory Squad, which we've mentioned, to work with our organization and promote youth engagement and Macy activities. For example, the YAS team, as we mentioned, provides feedback on issues and ideas like special reports. They give us ideas for social media. They help us create videos and other materials. They also provide systemic issues feedback, speak at events, co-host events, and deliver workshops. Currently, there are 12 members of the team who meet once every 2 weeks and also attend a number of other events with the youth engagement coordinators. Some things that they've been working on recently include developing programming for the National Youth Day, which is every year on November 20th, and also creating murals about children's rights, which will be displayed all around Manitoba.
So that said, we're going to get into questions and comments right away. In the meantime, here's our contact information and the different ways to get in touch with us if you ever have any more questions about our office, or if you need help accessing services for children and youth. We have offices here in Winnipeg at 346 Portage Avenue near Portage Place, and as mentioned in Thompson at City Centre Mall, if you want to have in-person visit as well. Our phone numbers and website are up on the screen, and you can also find us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube by searching Manitoba Advocate.